We have updates in the WNBA's collective bargaining and negotiations with the players' union, and my thoughts on it might surprise you. Let's talk ball. And what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? We're back. Andrew Hobner here. Happy to be with you. Happy you are here with us. Apologies for a little bit of radio silence on our end on the channel the last few days. I turned 31 years old on Monday, so already I'm losing motor function, losing hand-eye coordination, dropping things on my desk on the floor. You know, the dementia's setting in. It runs in my family. It'll be here on my doorstep soon enough. Lovely stuff. Very, very excited to be reigning in a new year. Now, all kidding aside, it was a great birthday and got some really just great time with my wife, literally touching grass at Garden of the Gods in Colorado Springs, about an hour south of where we are in Denver. And it was very nice. So very thankful to have a loving wife, good people in my corner, great group of people here at No Cap Space, and great group of folks that sit here, listen, and engage with our stuff. So thank you for a wonderful year, and we'll continue to have a wonderful year, at least in my life. Hopefully I don't get hit by a bus. Let's talk a little bit of WNBA CBA news. For those of you that have not seen quite yet what has happened, we got a new update coming from ESPN, Alexa Philippou and Michael Veppel, basically the entire crew from ESPN. They've been on their game for a lot of this labor negotiation. Mike Vornikoff has also been great at The Athletic. So there's been a ton. So let's talk about it and let's dive in. We'll read it through it as a family and kind of react as we go. So as league meetings were held in New York this past week with WNBA team owners, presidents, general managers, and coaches, one question prevailed over the gatherings. When will the WNBPA, the Women's National Basketball Players Association, and the WNBA agree on a new collective bargaining agreement? And can a work stoppage be on the horizon? New details trickled out Tuesday night. The league's latest proposal, initially reported by the Associated Press and confirmed by ESPN, includes revenue sharing with a maximum salary of more than $1.1 million starting in 2026, with a league minimum of more than $220,000 and an average of more than $460,000. All right. Let's talk dollars and cents, because I think it's a good deal. And I know that what people have heard me advocate for on this show a lot is, no give, no break, hold the line, etc. But I think what people have sometimes missed about what we've been talking about and how we've been analyzing this is that, like, at some point, a deal is what is wanted. I don't necessarily see, I don't like the fact that the WNBA is so codependent of the NBA and kind of vice versa at this point, right? If it were up to me, I would see a whole new league be created on much more favorable terms, which is why I gravitate towards Unrivaled, because I actually like the model that they have for governance and for ownership and for players and equity stakes. However, I'm not a fool. I know that in order to do that, it would constitute a massive and major risk. And I don't want the WNBA necessarily to go away in the form that it is. A lot of work has been put into this league, and I think I have not done a good enough job of explaining to people why the W is important and why it is a league that is worth saving, right? It's just that in saving it, you have to save it for your labor and the labor that comes next. What allows a company or a corporation or a sports league to achieve that constant self-sufficiency is presenting an active path for your labor to find a way to succeed. And the biggest issue that the WNBA has had, and from the minute it got started to the labor negotiation that it is currently in now, is that while it has presented a unique and unparalleled opportunity for women to find options playing professional basketball, they have inhibited the ability to make that something that is aspirational beyond the identity politics of women's empowerment. And while that thing is important, when you get to a point where the business interests start to override the greater thing you stand for, in today's world, money will sometimes speak louder, as we're seeing with Project B. And I've got another video on that coming too. So the WNBA is in a spot, and it always has been in a spot, where it's needed to be able to not just lean on this empowerment component, because that is very powerful and very important. And it is a cornerstone of the sport, because women's sports has always been rooted in a fight for empowerment, dating back to 72. It's all rooted in Title IX, which was a fight. It's rooted in Senda Berenson Abbott and Waylon Baptist. Like, the WNBA is the final conclusion of all of that fighting, and so I do think that while it is okay on the business side of things to hammer them over the head repeatedly for the way they go about their business, I think the idea that the WNBA needs to die and that any deal is not a good deal is incorrect. The ideal situation, obviously, would be divestment. However, as we're clearly all learning with Project B, Saudi money or VC tech money, being the thing that's driving that league, there is a environment and world in which walking away from the WNBA can backfire spectacularly. And unrivaled, to me, was the one thing that gave the leverage, because there was numbers to support that first year, right? But this is a good deal monetarily. To make $1.1 million on max deals and $220,000 on the base level for rookies, that's a huge jump. That's like a 3x jump for the rookies and about a 4.5x jump for the max level players and super max level players. But you can live comfortably anywhere on that sum. You can live comfortably in San Francisco, in New York, and LA for $220K. You can live great for $1 million. And it's like one of those things, like, in this economy, in this economy, you can still do it. So the finances feel like a positive step, because ultimately over the next 10 years and over the next 2 to 3 CBAs, you're going to be fighting this. And the thing that I am concerned about is the idea of thinking that you got to make it all back at once here. You don't necessarily have to do that. The important thing here is that revenue sharing is offered. However, the question is, and this is, an uncertainty that we're still seeing, is what the percentage of the revenue sharing is, but also if there is that little poison pill that the WNBA has kept in past CBAs, which is you have to reach a certain threshold and criteria to trigger the audits for the revenue sharing. And the WNBA has said that the players have never actually met the criteria to trigger the rev share clause in the CBA. However, what the discussion about that has been is that that's a moving target and somewhat arbitrary to start with. And so if it is those things, I want to see a little bit more specificity around the revenue sharing piece, because to me, that's the most important thing. I actually, believe it or not, I don't actually believe that the money is the thing you have to gun for more than anything else. I think the rev share is the hill to die on, because that's the thing that's going to increase in orders of magnitude as the money increases. And to be completely honest, to take it outside of women's basketball, I think the arms race around finances of contracts in men's sports is reaching a place of unsustainability. And the reality is that the lesson to take from the men's sports is being willing to hand away a higher share of the revenues of basketball or athletics related income in exchange for lower salaries. Because what you're seeing now is they're trying to pay these guys much more upfront, and you're having to create all these different salary cap conditions to sort of rein in aggressive spending. And in the NBA especially, teams are being broken up because they can't afford to pay the mid-level guys. And so you end up in this weird place where people are still getting screwed. cap circumvention is happening, these like delayed annuity contracts that they're doing in baseball right now, it all creates an avenue of unsustainability. And that to me, I think is the thing, that rev share over money is the important thing. So it says it remains unclear what the players think of the proposal and whether it moves the needle. The union did not respond to comment. What if the uncertainty reigns? The longer both sides go without a deal, the greater the ramifications will be. ESPN has everything you need to know about CBA negotiations, yada, yada, yada. So the other thing I wanted to put here is that, as we mentioned, like operating in businesses, some of that is practice facilities and things for the players, et cetera. Expanding retirement and pregnancy and family planning benefits are a huge thing. Those, interestingly enough, apparently Breanna Stewart said those were the only 2 bullet points that both sides agreed on. And then, of course, the fight over prioritization. And this is the thing that Project B, European leagues, Unrivaled, Athletes Unlimited, this is going to be the big fight, because I think the argument's going to be if you're paying players more, they need to go in. And guess what, folks? The last thing I'll say on that, I agree with the owners there too. If you're paying me $1 million plus or $10 million plus, and I get a rev share, and there are all of the things you want, including pensions and benefits and all of those other pieces, then yeah, I do think exclusivity is okay when the investment is that significant. And this is where I worry for the players is, if you're going to fight over prioritization, then we're going to start to get into some tricky territory. This is where the conflict of interest piece, where people were talking about Unrivaled and people were talking about Project B, this is where they've always had a point. And while I will always contend that the conflict of interest piece for Unrivaled is good on its face, and even in Project B, as much as I don't like who is investing in the league and don't think the league is going to be successful, the leverage of it is still good, especially knowing with a little more reason that, the Saudi money might not be as in this as I think it is. However, as I said in a future video, I'll touch on it, this money is still not great, and we'll dive into where it's coming from because I've been doing some reporting on that for you. But the thing generally to me is that Unrivaled as leverage is good. I've never gotten the impression that Unrivaled was anything but leverage. However, if everyone is right on the other end, first of all, I'll eat crow on that. But it will create a problem because it will create issues of prioritization. Now, the European players, I think, is a different thing that we have to look at a different point because their situations are unique and specific, especially as it pertains to stuff like Eurobasket and like international play. But everything else, I think, seems relatively okay. Interestingly, it is not said, the prioritization is not said to be a major point of contention. So this tells me, and again, this is why I feel as though Unrivaled was always a leverage point. Like, this is why I feel that the conflict of interest thing, at least from the Unrivaled side, was never that important, because if this was considered a freak out point, you'd hear it now. You would not have heard it 4 or 5 months ago when the negotiations were still happening. If you're hearing it's not a big deal now, then they're telling you that all of what they put out in the news about it was bunk to start, and I think that's something that is always worth sort of considering. The core system with the franchise tag, I think that is more of something that the players want, but I think from a competitive balance perspective, I actually think this is okay. The roster limits got to change. You have to grow the actual roster sizes. This nonsense from Kathy about, having to expand because that's how you grow the size, that doesn't help the teams. And we saw it this year with the injuries. I think that's really the big thing. Scheduling and moving games, I don't even want to touch that for now, just because it isn't to me super important. I don't think they're going to change. And Major League Soccer just announced they're going to go to a winter calendar. So now the WNBA is only competing with baseball. I don't see why you wouldn't want to do that to become the sport of the summer. And to be honest, I think the NBA as a league that has the global aspirations of trying to be like the NFL, when you think about the calendar, the NFL owns the calendar because it's 365 days a year of news. No one's really tuning into summer league like that, and the NBA, I think, does have a summer gap where free agency is the most important thing, but it really only takes about a month. And then you lose time in your shoulder seasons to like NFL draft time, March Madness, etc. And then you get into like NBA finals, hit free agency in the summer league, in the fall, football comes. Like if you are considering the WNBA as a partner product, the WNBA gives you 365 days a year of coverage. And if you're making money off that, then I don't think they have an incentive to change the calendar significantly. So the other component, the Unrivaled of it all, as ESPN is quoted here, some players have indicated they hope Unrivaled with its high salaries and impressive player amenities can apply pressure to the WNBA during this current round of negotiations. This is what I mean. I think personally, I think Unrivaled was always a means, and that's why I always rode for it. I never saw it as a competitor. And honestly, I don't think the people that are running the thing do too. However, I think Project B does. And, they can lie about it and say they don't. I think they do. So that's kind of my piece on that. Draft eligibility, I think, is ridiculous. And I think Juju Watkins, good as she may be, everybody has shown you going into the WNBA, there's an adjustment period. Paige and Caitlin are exceptions to the rule where, yes, could they have come in a year earlier? Sure. But the physical difference between college and pro for women is so extreme. And I need people to be fucking for real about the idea that a freshman 17-year-old girl can go into the league and play against 27-year-old women. It's a different game, man. It just is. So draft eligibility is nonsense. The expansion draft component is also interesting because it's basically said that the concept for the league is to really I believe you can only protect 5 players. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a minute. But you're only allowed to protect 5 players. So like you protect your starting 5 and the whole bench goes. So I will say it's going to make free agency really fun. And I think that's sort of a piece that's worth looking into. And then the October 30th update. This one was a little while back, but basically sticking point being salary system and revenue sharing. And that's pretty much where we're at with all of this is, this notion that we are waiting to see, but I think we're starting to get into the ballpark of money that at least I think is good and rev shares that I think are good. The contention that I would still have is I would take away the stipulations for the rev share. That to me would be the only thing, because now it creates a framework where you have to show us the books every year. So your side and our side can audit what's basketball-related income and let that be doled out to the players. I think that, honestly, I feel that the smart thing to do is look at the salaries and say, okay, that's fine. Now let's talk about the rev share. Once you talk about the rev share, then I think you can make a deal. Then you can worry about all of the other stuff happening in the other leagues and how it's all going to come about. But if prioritization is not the thing that's being battled over, it tells me that the league doesn't ultimately care that much if they're able to get what they want on the financial side. So let us know what you think in the comments. A whole lot to come. I've got stuff on Project B coming as well. I have spent the last couple days doing some research on the money backers, and even if it is not the Saudi PIF through Salus Sports that is investing and funding in this league, the 3 publicly known backers of Project B have their hands in some interesting places and have some pretty fascinating public views if you're into that kind of thing. So be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Hit nocapspacewbb.com. We just changed our website. It's new. It's beautiful. Subscribe there where the ball knowers get a cheaper buy-in price. And of course, be a part of the ball knowers here on YouTube and over there on the website. However you want to be a part of this conversation, be sure to be a part of it with us, because nobody does conversation quite like No Cap Space. We'll see y'all later.